What's up? It's Bradley with All Access Sports bringing you our Week 9 edition of our Sleepers, Studs, and Stacks. So go ahead, grab your coffee, grab your notepad, scribble out some notes, and let's get into the video and put together this week's lineup. If you've been here before, I appreciate you stopping back in. What we do in this video is we look at our sleepers, our studs, and our stacks. And so those sleepers are going to be guys that are under $5,500 that we can put into our lineup so we can go get those studs, those high-value guys that are worth a lot of money and you need them to pay off because you are investing so much into them. And then our stacks. Who are we going to pair with our quarterback? What quarterback wide receiver options are there, or what run back opportunities exist? So if you're coming back from another video, go ahead and drop a like. You know it automatically gives you a better chance of cashing this week. It's just how the world works. And make sure you stick around to the end so you can find out how you can win a Millionaire Maker ticket for next week's contest. That's right. It's in the video or down in the description. If you want to scroll down there while I kind of just jibber jabber for a second, go ahead, scroll on down. We made 2 lineups last week. There's this one down below, which had wide receivers busted all over the place. But we told you I was going to absolutely stuff my running back. So I got McCaffrey, Kamara, and Travis Etienne. And then the lineup that we took a little bit more of a deeper look at in this video, as well as over on Patreon. McCaffrey, Kamara, Thielen, decent game. George Pickens didn't pay off for us as well. Josh Downs, unfortunately, getting injured. Trey McBride, we told you that's really the only tight end that I was interested in at $2,800. What an absolute bargain. With the exception of last week, I don't like paying down for my quarterback. I might do it again if I'm trying to play in one of these bigger tournaments with Bryce Young going up against the Indianapolis Colts. They are terrible defensively. Frank Reich going up against his former team. Bryce Young looks like he's starting to get things going. Now, the points aren't necessarily there, but he looks pretty good, and he's not giving up a lot of interceptions. The problem is we're not getting a lot of touchdowns out of him. Keep in mind, this week you're missing some of the biggest offenses out there. The Dolphins, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Bengals, all of these guys are not available. Now, as I just mentioned, I don't normally pay down for my quarterback, but if there is one to look at this week, and maybe it's a bounce back game, maybe he's actually going to be performing, old Mr. Towelboy, Deshaun Watson, if we can get 21, one of these games out of him, I'm feeling pretty decent going up against an Arizona Cardinals defense that is pretty bad against the pass overall, giving up a lot of points defensively. Deshaun Watson, if you have one game where you come out and actually perform, this should be the one. Running backs under $5,500. Kareem Hunt looks like he's going to be the lead back, but that doesn't really mean much when you're sharing the backfield with Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong right now. So again, 14 attempts last week. I believe he led the team. It's only going to get more convoluted as Jerome Ford returns from injury. Again, you get a bad rushing defense from Arizona matched up against the Cleveland Browns, who might not want to trust Deshaun Watson to throw the ball. Kareem Hunt might be your guy, but at $5,500, there is a little bit of better value down below. Ramondre Stevenson, and now on first glance, you might be like, Bradley, what are you doing? This guy has not been very good this year. He has an 18 and a 14, but he has a 2 and a 7 in there. Yeah, you're going up against the Washington Commanders that basically just sold their entire defense. Even Cam Curl, their safety, is like, what are we doing here? That defensive line is absolutely washed right now. So this rush defense that was already 21st worst in the league is going to continue to plummet. I hate the Patriots. I think Mac Jones is a not good quarterback. But if they're able to just open things up a little bit and Washington plays back and Mac Jones threatens some sort of offensive firepower, things should open up for Ramondre Stevenson. Chuba Hubbard takes over as the main guy in this Carolina Panthers backfield. Again, I'm sorry. Last week I said Miles Sanders did have my interest, but I didn't love it. Chuba Hubbard has my interest, but I don't love it. One thing that's working for him is going up against this Indianapolis Colts defense, who ranks 25th against the pass. Bryce Young, maybe they fear him a little bit after coming off a good game last week. He hasn't thrown a lot of turnovers. 23rd against the run. That plays into the hands of Chuba Hubbard, who's getting involved not only in handoffs, but also a little bit in the passing game. Now that he's going to be the main guy, we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. At $5,000, I like it, don't love it as much as Ramondre Stevenson. One thing to keep an eye on this week is this Houston Texans running back situation. Dameon Pierce is out. Devin Singletary was the lead guy last week. Beck, I believe, got a handoff and a reception last week. Unfortunately, had a fumble. But they're getting involved a couple of people, but Devin Singletary is really the only guy that's getting handoffs out of the backfield. I don't love it against this Tampa Bay defense. You're having to pay up for a lot of the guys this week, especially with less than stellar offenses. But if you want to be different, Singletary's there. I don't like it nearly as much as Stevenson, Hunt, or Hubbard. Just take a look at it. Cleveland Browns have one of the best rushing defenses in the league, so I don't plan on playing him. But Keontae Ingram, who's really going to challenge him for touches this week? Not Tony Jones Jr., that's for dang sure. Wide receivers under $5,500 for that threshold to be a value pick in our eyes, or a sleeper pick, if you will. I'm not going to pick you somebody that's $8,000, but I think he's going to go off. We're playing real deep. Drake London out. That leaves you what? Van Jefferson, Cadrell Hodge, Mac Hollins. Just keep an eye on that. It is Taylor Heineke behind the helm, but the Minnesota defense is absolutely terrible. We've picked on them. You've picked on them all season. Keep an eye out there for Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, maybe some of these other weapons, but like Mac Hollins really hasn't gotten involved. Van Jefferson hasn't really gotten involved. Cadrell Hodge, they haven't really been super successful offensively by any means for any of the guys that you've drafted. But with Drake London out against a bad Minnesota Vikings defense, things could change this week. Another injury to be looking out for is Kendrick Bourne. Now, this Washington defense, like I said, is terrible, but the New England defense hasn't really been, or offense hasn't really been that good. So this is going to make Demario Douglas, Juju Smith-Schuster, they're going to be near the top. Maybe Jalen Reagor gets a little bit of a look, but if you look at these wide receiver situation, they got two guys that are out. So that puts Demario Douglas in there, who had 7 targets last week, 6 the week before, not getting heavily involved. Definitely not getting heavily involved is Juju Smith-Schuster. At $4,000, you're getting there technically wide receiver 1 against a bad defense in Washington. I'm okay with taking a chance at that $4,000. Go up and get you a number 1 wide receiver. Plug in those expensive running backs because they are very limited this week, and see if that has any luck for you. Again, most instances, I wouldn't be playing a Patriots wide receiver, but he has to have a high floor because they have so many limited weapons at the wide receiver position. A lot of people are saying to look out for Jahan Dotson coming off his best game of the season, 10 targets last week, 27 points and a touchdown, over 100 yards. That's a huge boost for him. If they can make something happen against this New England defense, that's fantastic. I'm probably going to be fading it because I think there's better options out here. KJ Osborne would be good if Kirk Cousins was available. Gets a new passer in Joshua Dobbs. Not sure how that's going to operate coming right off the rip. But Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne might be off my radar just for a second. Rashid Shaheed, he certainly still gets a look. 8 targets, 3 targets last week, 8 the week before, 6 the week before. Playing pretty well. The last one I want to talk about is Jonathan Mingo. And yes, I know, I'm a Panthers fan. We've been over that. But he's getting good volume. They really, unfortunately, haven't converted to anything. But again, you're going up against a Indianapolis Colts defense that we've picked on all year. So hear me make my case real quick. 5, 3, 7, 6, 8. That's good enough for a wide receiver 2 targets at $3,400. Who else is in this price range of $3,400? You want to take Brandon Powell with a new quarterback? No. Julio Jones, what has he done this season? Nothing. Alec Pierce, maybe without Josh Downs. I get it, 5.362, but Mingo's still getting more targets at the same necessary price point. Darnell Mooney, not really getting involved since Badgen's taken over. Nothing has really popped for him. Rashad Bateman going up against bad Seattle defense, capped at 3 targets a game. Scotty Miller against Atlanta. We've already talked about this. They don't really have any weapons that are threatening anything. Jonathan Mingo, we talked about. Jamison Crowder. Curtis Samuel is out, so he could see another uptick, but he could also fall flat on his face if they just want to go with Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, Wan'Dale Robinson. It looks like he was getting involved, and then over the last 2 weeks hasn't really done very much. Lots of injuries overall with that team. Jake Bobo, in case you want to go for wide receiver 4 out of Seattle, going up against a really good Baltimore Ravens defense. New quarterback Taylor Heineke, do you want to take a chance on this so far this season? Yes, they are dealing with some injuries, so he's going to have a little bit more involvement. But DJ Chark, also questionable. He was practicing, but even with him still getting a decent amount of volume, Jonathan Mingo is also getting a good amount of volume. So I don't love it. I might not put it in my lineup, but my lowest price guy that I would be targeting this week would be Jonathan Mingo with, 6 targets a game on average over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Whew, I'm out of breath, man. I was talking a lot for Jonathan Mingo. Tight ends, and I say it every single week. If it's not Travis Kelce or not Mark Andrews and possibly not TJ Hawkinson, I really don't care about who I pick. Let me go down and find someone that's dirt cheap that's going to have a pop-off week. Last week, that was Trey McBride. At $2,800, we got him for 20-plus points. Sure, other people were talking about him, but I told you that was really the only guy that I was interested in. So who are we targeting this week? Now, if we're just talking about guys under $5,500 that catch my eye, TJ Hawkinson, new quarterback. Dallas Goedert, there is some interest there. He over, the last 4 weeks, 2 weeks are really good, a 28 and an 18-point game. I'm happy with that at $4,800. Not sure if we're going to get that against a really good Dallas defense. Taysom Hill going up against the Chicago Bears. Now, obviously, he's being used in a multitude of ways. It's not just him catching the ball, but they need something offensively to get going. Maybe he does continue to get involved. Again, that's probably his max week. There's nothing wrong with getting 22 points out of a $4,000 guy. But he hit his max last week. I would assume he comes back down to earth with one of these 10 to 12 point games. Still very happy with that. To show you that I'm not that much of a homer when I'm picking the Carolina Panthers, I'm going against the grain here with Kylan Granson of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, Joshua Downs is injured. This tight end room is a little bit convoluted, but he's the guy who's getting more targets than anyone else out of the tight end room for Indianapolis. He just kind of sneaks out and finds room. 4-3-5-4. We're consistently getting targets at $2,700. No touchdowns except for this 10-point game. This Carolina Panthers defense has been decent against the pass. They're still dealing with a lot of injuries. I think Kylan Granson does have a chance to have his arguably best week of the season, and I would take him to get 10 to 15 points. And then opposite of that, I talked about the wide receiver issues that they're currently having. If you want to go for Hunter Henry for 3,600, that's fine. If you look at his targets over the last few weeks, 333, 2-5. Similarly, Mike Gesicki, about $1,000 cheaper, 3-2-3-4-3, essentially identical target share. Now, obviously, we're getting more red zone looks with Hunter Henry and not Mike Gesicki. High-priced quarterbacks, there's a lot to like. There's a lot to hate. There's a lot of injuries up top. We're not getting our big offenses. Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, obviously like both of those. Dak Prescott against Philadelphia, we talked about it. That passing defense, not as good as we thought it was going to be. C.J. Stroud in a bounce-back game against the Tampa Bay defense, who's given up some big plays at times. I like that play. Geno Smith against Baltimore, don't like that. Sam Howell against New England, I like it, don't love it. At $5,800, he's probably going to get a 15 to 20-point game, which I'm comfortable with because he is getting 4 to 5 times his value, but that puts us basically back at the 5,500 mark, and I'd rather just pay down an extra $1,000 or $700 to go get Bryce Young. But if I had to pick quarterbacks, ranking them just based off of what I think they're going to do this weekend, Lamar Jackson at the top, then we'd probably go down to Dak Prescott, C.J. Stroud, Jalen Hurts, then down to Sam Howell. Those are probably my top 5 point scoring plays at quarterback position of the weekend. I don't think that's going to surprise anyone. Alvin Kamara has to be one of the hottest running backs in the league right now outside of CMC. Jahmyr Gibbs, if you only want to include the last 2 weeks, they've both been absolutely incredible since he's come back. These are phenomenal numbers. We absolutely love to see 17 handoffs, 5 targets, double-digit targets. That's fantastic usage going up against the Chicago Bears defense that is terrible against the pass, pretty good against the run. I assume they're going to put him out into space. And see what he can do, get the ball in his hands. Saquon Barkley, really the only offensive threat that the Giants have had over the past few weeks. Now, Darren Waller is out with an injury. Just turn around and hand the ball off. 36 attempts, yeah, just force feed him. That's fine. Who else needs to touch the ball? Just give him 36 touches a game. If I'm drafting him and I have him in fantasy football, 36, that's the perfect amount. That's what I want. Kenneth Walker against the Baltimore Ravens, I like, don't love. Josh Jacobs against the New York Giants, I'm going to continue to fade him until they get this offensive situation figured out. I was heavily invested in him at the beginning of the year, but you've seen his numbers steadily decline from 7,700 now to 6,900. Jonathan Taylor going up against my Carolina Panthers, I like this. I wish they weren't splitting handoffs with Zach Moss, but that just seems to be the way it is. I think it was 51 to 49% of snaps last week, so 12 attempts, 2 targets out of the backfield. We know he's going to get involved in the passing game. Panthers, again, somehow they're decent against the pass in terms of yardage, but they're still 31st in points allowed and 29th against the run. They're getting picked apart in the run game. Jonathan Taylor is probably going to be a smash. Gus Edwards in a fantastic spot against the Seattle Seahawks. 22nd against the pass. Hopefully, that means the Seahawks are playing a little bit more guarded against the wide receivers, and we can loosen up from this 8th-ranked rushing defense that they have. These games can get a little squirrely. They can both score in a hurry when they need to. Gus Edwards at $5,900, yeah, I absolutely love that when we've gotten 21 and 29 out of him the last 2 weeks. Again, if I have to rank them, it's probably Kamara 1, Barkley 2, Taylor 3, Gus Edwards 4, and then we're going to sprinkle in some sort of mixture of Kenneth Walker, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, if you are interested in that. I'm probably going to be fading him against the Philadelphia Eagles defense, and we've only gotten 2 double-digit games out of him in the last 5 weeks. Usually I'm stuffing running backs and getting some low-end wide receivers, but there's some real value up at the higher end. You still have A.J. Brown in there. You still have Cooper Kupp against Green Bay, who got rid of Rasul Douglas. CeeDee Lamb against Philadelphia, 32nd against the pass. I'm still stunned by that number. Davante Adams against the Giants. I would love to take Davante Adams, but until they get that quarterback situation solved, not sure. But also, Aiden O'Connell could just force feed Davante Adams and we get one of these monster 12, 13, 20 target games out of him. I can absolutely see that happening. Aiden O'Connell coming in, just wants to make his superstar happy. Just feed him the ball. Give him attempts. Davante is going to make the catch. Just give him a chance to make the catch, and I can absolutely see that happening. Adam Thielen, I think, is overpriced for the first time this year. It's crazy that he started out at 46, 39, 39, and now he's been priced all the way up to 7,500. But if I am taking Bryce Young, it's probably going to be Adam Thielen or Jonathan Mingo again. Dirt cheap for Jonathan Mingo, still getting 5-6 targets a game. The problem is you might have one of these 15-point games if Adam Thielen isn't found in the red zone. Puka Nacua currently listed as questionable, little inflammation in the knee. Mike Evans going up against the Houston Texans. Adam Thielen, 11 targets, 8 catches last week against Houston. Mike Evans should see a similar stat line. Chris Godwin, a little bit cheaper if you want to look at what DJ Chark and Jonathan Mingo were able to do. Again, 6-7 targets each in that one. Probably going to be in his similar stat line, so you can expect a 15 to 20-point game from Chris Godwin. Lastly, just talking about the Houston Texans wide receivers, Nico Collins you have at 5,800, Tank Dell you have at 5,300. Both of them getting like 5-6 targets a game. Tank Dell getting involved more with some trickeration plays. Nico Collins just flat out being a wide receiver. Tampa Bay hasn't been wonderful against the pass this year. They've been really good in points allowed. Now, just looking at some of the players we mentioned already, Lamar Jackson, Alvin Kamara, Gus Edwards, Jonathan Mingo, Van Jefferson to get you dirt cheap guys. I would like to improve the wide receiver situation, so I don't love it. Mark Andrews, Baltimore. Chuba Hubbard going up against the Indianapolis Colts being running back 1. I like, don't love. I want to see my guys do good, so I could have some interest in there. Now, on the flip side, you could say Seattle's defense has been absolutely spectacular throughout the month of October. Let's make something a little bit different, but if you want to leave this, you still have Amari Cooper with a returning Deshaun Watson, Jordan Addison against a decent Atlanta Falcons defense, new quarterback, DJ Moore against New Orleans, Nico Collins, we talked about him against Tampa Bay. We like Zay Flowers, get you more with Lamar Jackson, Terry McLaurin against New England, who's had been susceptible, Tank Dell. There's options to fill your last gap. Or just stuffing in some guys who are expected to have a high team total. Obviously, $300, there's still some room to play with. Stroud against Tampa Bay, pair him up with Nico Collins. Maybe you want to put Dalton Schultz in here. You could probably squeeze him in. Top tier running backs in Alvin Kamara. Force feed Saquon Barkley against the Las Vegas defense. That's not very good. But again, there's still room to pay down here if you want to go after Gus Edwards, Ramondre Stevenson, or you want Tony Pollard in one of the higher scoring games on the slate this week. Or also Jonathan Taylor. I talked about how terrible the Panthers have been. Jonathan Mingo as a value play, CeeDee Lamb against Philadelphia Eagles in a high-scoring game, Nico Collins against a third-worst Tampa Bay passing defense, Kylan Granson against the Carolina Panthers, again, you can pay up, and then Rashid Shaheed, New Orleans, expected to have the highest point total on the Sunday slate for the main slate. I would love to see him and Alvin Kamara pop off. Obviously, Olave would be in play for me. Taysom Hill could be considered, but I would be okay with that. Again, this isn't a final lineup. It's not being locked into my Millionaire Maker, but I feel like it's going to have a high enough floor and high enough pop percentage to make something big happen. If Tampa Bay does give up a lot of yards, Nico Collins going to be on the receiving end, CeeDee Lamb could have one of his massive games against a very bad passing defense in the Philadelphia Eagles. These 44-point games, I don't expect. A 20-point game is probably more realistic, so I don't know if I'm absolutely getting the value, but again, because we have $300 remaining, there is some movement to go get Cooper Kupp against a Rasul Douglas-less Green Bay Packers. Take a chance with Davante Adams against a bad New York Giants team. Adam Thielen, if you do want to pair him up with Bryce Young, that's obviously an option. Mike Evans against the Houston Texans. Devontae Smith against Dallas Cowboys. There's options. There's options to fill it out. Don't take it just for me. Do your own research. Do your own advice, and I appreciate you watching. Don't forget, for your chance to win a Millionaire Maker ticket into next week, that's Week 10's NFL slate, all you have to do is drop a comment below with who you think is going to be the highest score and their points total. So I don't need the exact decimal point, but if you think it's going to be Alvin Kamara with 38 points and he gets 38.6, just put Alvin Kamara 38 points down in the description below. 1 entry per user. Deadline is 1 p.m. Eastern time on kickoff day. Put it down there for your chance to win. I'll be monitoring and I'll be answering your questions down in the description. Now, if you want my starting 5, an injury report, weather news, and our player rankings, find all that down in Patreon, also down in the description below. I appreciate you watching. Give a thumbs up, and I'll see you next week.